thank you so much for making the time to come to learn more about the role of the director people at SignHealth. It's really exciting. Who am I? I'm Joanna Wootten, and I'm chairing tonight. I'm using SSE, plus we've got an interpreter BSL. We've got 2 interpreters who will take in turns to work, okay? So if you've just arrived, you need multi-pinning, let us know in the chat, okay? If there are any other issues, let us know in the chat. Plus, if when people are talking, then I want to ask a question, you can use the chat now and I will keep an eye on the questions. Okay? Everybody clear? We're all excited, yes. And so who are the other people? We've got James, who's the chief executive. And
Hello,
we've got Emmanuel, who's leading the recruitment.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
And so we're going to be hearing from James. He's going to describe what the role is, what he's looking for about SignHealth strategy. Okay. And let's be honest, it gives you an opportunity to think about, do I want to work with James? Hopefully you do.
Yes, please.
But remember, you'll also be working with the executive leadership team, plus other people at SignHealth. Then Emmanuel will describe a bit later about the recruitment process. So everybody clear? Are we all looking forward to hearing from James? Over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. In case it's not clear, a big thanks to Joanna, because Joanna doesn't work at SignHealth, although she did a very, very long time ago. But Joanna often supports our work and I think provides a really helpful bridge between the work we're doing with Emmanuel in this case at Diversifying Group, the kind of deaf community, and really want to make sure that you understand you can ask questions of Joanna about what it's like to work in the deaf community, what SignHealth is like from a deaf perspective, if you want to get Joanna's view on that, because Joanna's not employed by SignHealth and she can give you a very objective view. Anyway, welcome. It's really nice to see you. I really appreciate you giving up some time on your Monday evening. And yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about SignHealth and about the role, but really looking forward to answering some questions. So please do keep those questions coming while I'm talking. I try not to repeat just what's in the pack, which I'm sure many of you have seen on the Diversifying Group website, but it's a really exciting time at SignHealth. I know everyone always says that about every job, but it really genuinely is true at SignHealth. We are the deaf health charity and we are here for a very, very clear purpose. As deaf people, I'm a deaf person wearing hearing aids and using captions. As deaf people, our health is significantly worse than hearing people's, and there's no good reason for that, and we can fix that. So our purpose at SignHealth is to eliminate the health inequality that we experience as deaf people. The organisation was set up in 1986, so we're kind of approaching our 40-year anniversary, and we do some really, really amazing things every day, and we need help to make sure that we're doing those things as well as we can, and we are on a significant growth journey as an organisation. So I arrived in post back in 2016, so coming on for 8 years, and it's been a really exciting period, particularly in the last few years, where we have grown considerably. So when I arrived, we were about £4 million turnover, and we're now about 10 million. This new financial year just begun. We have a budget of £10 million. We had about 130 staff, I think, when I joined, and we now have 200. But excitingly, our new 3-year plan pushes us towards a position in 2027 where we expect to have a turnover of 15 million and employ at least 300 staff. And so we are, as I keep saying in recent weeks, we're on an exciting growth journey, but we're not saying that from a kind of standstill position of, wouldn't it be nice if we grew? We are actively growing. We're twice the size that we were 3 years ago. And we have really clear plans on how we're going to get to our growth again of another 50% to 15 million. When I talk about SignHealth, I say we do 5 things. We deliver social care. The biggest thing we do is delivering social care services. So we have services, residential services in Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham and London, as well as community services. And about half of SignHealth staff, about 100 people, work in the delivery of those services. So they work in most of them in residential services and therefore in kind of physical locations. The other half of the staff at SignHealth are remotely based. We don't have an office, and we used to in London, but we don't anymore. So we do social care. That's the first thing we do. We do psychological therapy. So we have a contract from NHS England to deliver what in the hearing world is called talking therapy, and for us it's called signing therapy, where we employ trained therapists to deliver psychological therapy directly to deaf people in sign language. The third thing we do, we have a domestic abuse support service that we're very, very proud of. We have recent funding from the Home Office to expand that nationally. So for a very long time, that's been a London and South East only service. And now at long last, deaf people across the country have access to specialist domestic abuse support. So very, very proud of that service, and it's expanded significantly. When we had an office back in 2019, although it was hot desks, the domestic abuse team had 4 desks. They're now a team of 30 people, so it's really very different to what it used to be. So those are our 3 kind of long-term existing services. We've just this year launched our Children and Young People strategy, and we worked recently with the National Deaf Children's Society to take on some of the services that they were moving away from strategically. So we're growing in that area too. We've recently hired new participation leads and so on. And then the 5th thing that we do is our campaign called Deaf Together, trying to encourage the community to work together on the overall picture of equality, because we know that health is not just about access to health services. Health is about your employment, your access to education, your living standards. So we want to make sure that we are working across the sector for overall equality, which in turn leads to health equality. So those 5 things are really the kind of the focus of what we do every day. Of course, a big part of my role and my colleagues working kind of policy is to try and influence the NHS and try to make sure that deaf people are remembered when it comes to health policy, which is harder than it might sound. But we're a really exciting organisation and unusual because we are a disabled people's organisation, which means that the majority of us, approximately 75% of staff at SignHealth, are deaf. And so we're a user-led organisation. We're talking about our own community. We're often talking from our own lived experience, and that's really, really special. But it is not a ghetto. We do not seek to only employ deaf people, and we have lots of hearing colleagues who work with us, and very grateful for their own lived experience and their own perspective on what we're doing too. So we have everything that you would imagine as HR professionals. We have everything to wrestle with that comes along with that context. So we have colleagues working in lots of different circumstances. We have remote working colleagues. We have colleagues working 24 hours a day in social care. We have colleagues who are relatively low paid, sadly. And we have colleagues at every level of seniority. We have all of the challenges of keeping up with HR legislation and the shifting sands of flexible working and so on. And we are trying to support the learning and development of a larger and larger staff team. One of the things I often talk about is we've just, I guess, exceeded that magical number of 150 staff where it's just about possible to get away with knowing the name of the person who does that thing. And we're now too big of an organisation to rely on that informality, and we need more system and we need more process. I come from a much from an organisational background that's a much bigger organisation, so I've worked in much bigger charities in my career. So I'm a bit more used to working in that way, but SignHealth isn't, and we are trying to slowly integrate more systems. So we have a transformation program just beginning that will bring a bit more system into some of the work we do, but we are looking for somebody who has experience of, I don't just mean systems in terms of like, a software package, but a more systematic way of working and a way of working that doesn't rely on an individual. We have very low staff turnover, not so low that it's kind of frightening, but we have relatively low staff turnover, particularly when it comes to an organisation that delivers a lot of social care. We don't use agency staff at SignHealth because you can't get agency staff who are fluent in sign language. So we can't deliver our social care with agency staff, unlike almost every other social care provider. So some of the specifics to our context at SignHealth are unusual and I think really interesting. But some of our HR challenges are very typical around recruitment, around retention, around learning development, and we need a people strategy. So one of the big headlines of this role is coming in supporting us to deliver on a people strategy. We have an approach to people, but it's not written down and it's not, we haven't engaged in a proper strategy development exercise for our people strategy. So we're looking for someone who has experience of doing that perhaps, or somebody who has strong opinions about how we should do that and the stakeholders we need to engage to develop and what that should look like as an end product. Because we want to have a very strategic approach to the way that we work with the people that work alongside us. I know everyone always says it, but people genuinely, really and truly are our biggest asset at SignHealth, given how many people we employ who are deaf and how few deaf people there are in the country who can sign. We need to treat everybody who works at SignHealth like a very precious jewel and help them polish themselves and develop in their careers and flourish and hopefully stay at SignHealth for as long as possible. So we have a very particular approach to the way we look after our people, and we need someone to help us do that better and support it and understand it. So there's lots more information in the pack, which I'm sure a lot of you will have already read before you come to tonight's event, but I'm really happy to answer questions. I can talk a little bit more about our culture as an organisation and the kind of things that the job might be involved in. I think it's important to mention our board of trustees. We have a very fantastic board of 10 trustees, 7 of whom are deaf people, and they are appropriately involved. So they're very good at respecting the kind of exec, non-exec line, but they're really important group of stakeholders for us in our executive leadership team. And we have a people and pay committee, which is a subcommittee of the board, which kind of leads our work on through them, through the governance channels. So I think I will stop there and hand back to Joanna because I want to have lots of time for questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, James. That was excellent. Really helpful overview. And I'm sure people will be babbling away with questions. But first, I think we should hear from Emmanuel to describe the recruitment process and to remind people about the deadline as well.
Hi, everyone. There we go. So as another introduction, I'm Emmanuel Crosser and I'm the head of executive search here at the Diversifying group. I'm absolutely thrilled to be partnering with SignHealth on the recruitment of the director of people. The reason why SignHealth have approached us is because they're at an exciting point within their journey and they really want a Diversifying group to scour the market and look for talented individuals who can assist them on this next part of their journey. One thing that was at the core of that was making sure that we're able to scour the market and reach as many communities as possible to accurately reflect the world that we live in. In terms of a process, what we've tried to do is make sure that we've got a robust process and measuring a criteria of who the talented individuals essentially will be. So this role will be open until the 28th of April at 11:59. And then the first round of interviews will be directly with myself and my team at Diversifying Group. The dates for that will be between the 30th of April and the 8th of May. From there, we'll be having a discussion with James and the team at SignHealth to talk about all of the applications that were invited to the initial round of interviews, and then we create a shortlist together. From there, there'll be one more round of interviews directly with SignHealth. We are thinking that these will be in person with various elements to it. So we believe it will be an interview that will be taken over in one day, with a panel interview, a potential presentation, and also a meet the team element, which we believe is really important for you to get to understand who you'll be working closely with. We're currently looking to finalize the dates, but we are thinking it's likely to be early/mid-June, but we will be sending out comms to everybody who has applied for the role or is interested in the opportunity to just give a little bit more clarity. Back over to you, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. That's really helpful. I'm just going to open up for questions now. I mean, if people haven't got questions, I can ask questions on your behalf. I'm James with emergency plan in case none of you feel up to asking questions. But I think it's also sometimes difficult when you've got lots of people. So if you don't feel here's a question. I'll come back to you in a minute, Bernadette. There's a question, okay. How would you describe the personality of your perfect candidate?
Thanks, John, for the question. It's a great question, actually. I suppose my keyword would be different. Have a really strong exec team that I'm really proud to work with, but I'm really obsessed with difference and I guess having the opportunity to work in a team that trusts one another to disagree. I really want to be challenged as a chief exec. I have a tendency to sound like I know what I'm doing when I really often don't. And the secret really is to challenge me and say, "Oh, that's really interesting. What about this instead?" Or I'm very likely to have my mind changed and for there to be a better decision. So I think the importance for me of working with a panel in the recruitment process, and as Emmanuel described, there'll be an opportunity to meet the team and hopefully some of the ELT colleagues as well on that final day. The benefit of that is that it's not me who makes the decision. It's not about who's perfect for me. It's about who's right for SignHealth. And sometimes, in my experience, the panel persuades me that we choose someone together who I might not have chosen on my own. And that's always, a really good choice. And those people turn out to be fantastic colleagues. And, I get a lot of benefit from working with a group in that sense. But taking the spirit of your question and being less pedantic, I think emotional intelligence is really important. We're an unusual organization in some ways. And I think if you're curious, if you have perhaps quite a lot of experience and you might feel, I doubt you feel bored. I'm sure you're all too busy to feel bored, but you might be looking for a bit of a new challenge or a new slant on stuff that you already feel quite confident about. SignHealth is a very different place to work in some obvious ways because so many of us are deaf people and so much of our work is delivered in sign language. And so that does have an impact on things like we have a new set of values that very recently agreed, that have not yet been launched. Really need some help to do that from a director of people. But launching values in SignHealth looks and feels different. You can't just kind of send out a whole load of text. Written information doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So there are some kind of practical challenges, but also we're an organisation that's doing a number of different types of service, and so we have slightly different cultures in our social care services to our therapy service, for example. Our social care colleagues are very practical, very can-do, quite quick. Our colleagues in therapy are much more reflective, slower, more academic, more intellectual. We have a group of very empowered women in our domestic abuse service, although not exclusively women anymore, who just have a very different culture in their team to the culture that you would experience in the campaigns team, for example, which is very new. So we're trying to lead an organisation that has multiple different cultures in an organisation that never meets in person, that works 24 hours a day. So I hope that there's something to draw you in as a candidate when you think, oh, I've kind of done a lot of this before, but never in quite this way. So I'm looking for somebody who has quite a lot of experience and can come and help us. You know, we need your wisdom, we need your experience, the tools you've developed, but we can help you perhaps consider those questions in a slightly different way. And there's some very talented people who work here who you probably wouldn't come across if you don't come and work in an organization like this. So I think there's kind of something for everybody. I would say that, of course, but yeah, I hope that's okay.
Thank you very much. There's some fantastic questions in the chat, but before we address those, I would really love to hear from Bernadette. Thank you for turning on your camera on and starting the ball rolling on the video. So let's hear from you.
I've got a few questions, but I'm also conscious that the other people have put questions in the chat. I think one of my questions, James, relates to a point that was made in the chat, and I accept the point you make about the fact that the majority of people work remotely, apart from those in social care and in other parts of the organisation. And I just wondered whether there are any plans to actually have an office space that people can come in and connect with each other face to face. Because I think that there's lots of benefits from, benefits obviously from remote, but also face-to-face connections.
Yeah, I agree, and I need to keep my answers shorter, or we'll never get through them, will we? But the short answer is we tried it. We had an office for 6 months about a year ago, and basically nobody came, nobody used it. We did the best possible trial with the lowest kind of bar to entry. We paid for people's travel, we paid for people's lunch when they got there. It was a really nice office in a really good location. Nobody came. And also now we employ people right across England and sometimes in other parts of the UK as well. So we have staff in Newcastle, Liverpool, Cornwall, Northumberland, Yorkshire, London. It would be impossible. Where would we have an office? So I think it's very unlikely, never say never, but very, very unlikely we will have an office again. I hope that's helpful. I think Bernadette might have frozen. Maybe I'm that thrilling. Oh no, she's back.
Yeah, I think I slightly lost connection. I heard the point about that you paid for people's lunch and travel, but people never really used it. Is that the gist of your response?
Yeah, so we're not going to have an office, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Okay, can I just come and follow up on that? Some people are saying, are there regular meetups with people? And are there other, I'm also wondering if it happens regionally. You know what I mean? Whether people get together in a specific directorate or something.
Yeah, so the people team that this director manages meets in person, I believe, once a month. There's a team of 5 people currently, although there's a kind of placeholder in our budget to expand that by another role in this current financial year. As an exec leadership team, as our ELT, we meet for a full day in person every 3 weeks, so slightly more often than once a month, because we felt that once a month was just not quite often enough. Just spotting an interpreter swap, so I'm going to pause. Thanks, David. We also meet once a month online to look at finance and performance. So we've begun to structure our meetings in such a way that we use Insights Discovery. If any of you are familiar with that tool, it's a bit like Myers-Briggs but with colours. We use the Insights Discovery across the organisation to understand one another a little bit better. And in that tool, in that language, we use our red-blue energy for our monthly finance and performance meetings, which are online and very decisive and very quick and very busy. And then we use our yellow-green energy for our face-to-face in-person meetings, which are much more discursive. We have much more time for conversation. We do make decisions, but it's a very different style of meeting. We're trying to really lean into those different ways of working and talking together and make the most of our quality time. So there is lots of opportunity to meet up. Colleagues who live near to another often meet up together and work together. It depends very much on kind of where you are and what your personal dynamic is. But I think a lot of us miss the opportunity to work in person. So we do try and do that. It's kind of as hybrid as we can make it, I suppose.
Can I just check with Bernadette, because you've still got your camera on, do you have other questions that you wanted to ask before I go to the chat and deal with the questions there?
I do, but I mean, I'm more than happy, Joanna, for you to go to the chat. I've just left my camera on, but I'm happy to turn it off and come back. You can circle back with me later if you like, if you want to take some other questions.
Okay, that goes to the chat a bit, then come back to, then I'm feeling fair, and is that all right? Thanks very much. Okay, there are quite a few questions about working with, particularly with the executive leadership team and so on. You said you meet every 3 weeks in person. Is that in one location or do you travel around or what?
It's almost always in London. We use the NCVO office. If you're familiar with that, it's near King's Cross, and a lot of colleagues' trains come into King's Cross, so we tend to use their office space. And we've moved around quite a lot in the last couple of years since we haven't had an office, but at the moment we meet every 3 weeks at NCVO. Very occasionally we meet in other locations like Manchester and stuff if we're also doing other things in the same week. Manchester and London tend to be our kind of most often meeting places.
And somebody was asking about opportunity for travel. Although you said people can work from home, do you expect them to travel around and see the services, etc., and how often or what?
Yeah, so I try to visit every team. It depends how you count teams, but I tend to try and visit every team for their team meeting once or twice a year if I can. And so that means I'm physically visiting our care homes. We have 6 residential services at the moment. So I try and visit them once or twice a year. The risk is that if we all visit them twice a year, there's always somebody walking through the door, and these are people's homes. So we have to balance some of that as a little bit. They're not office locations; they are literally where people live. That works very well at the moment, but there is a risk it could kind of go the wrong way. But yes, we want to encourage people to go to team meetings. So all of the teams at SignHealth do meet up in person, although not every month, depending on the nature of their work and how disparate they are. Some teams meet very often, some teams meet less often. So it's possible to pop into people's Zoom meetings, for example, and show your face and begin to develop some relationships in that way. But of course, because a lot of us are communicating in sign language, meeting face-to-face is even more beneficial because you have that kind of 3-dimensional experience, and it's just better. It's a bit more deaf-friendly, I think, to meet in person.
Thank you. Talking about being deaf-friendly, how important is it to have sign language skills and etc.? Thanks.
Well, the first thing I'd say is if you are hearing and don't have any sign language skills, please don't worry. Please do step forward and apply. We will support you to gain BSL skills and do your level 1 and level 2, and even level 3 qualification if you want to and are interested in it. The practical reality of our work is that we are always supported by wonderful interpreters, as we are by David and Liana today. And that's really important because however good your sign language is, we want to make sure that the communication everyone's receiving is kind of perfect. And there's a reason that David and Liana have trained for as long as they have. So the BSL training that you would have access to is more really for kind of more informal conversation with colleagues and so on. And we do need hearing people as well as deaf people at SignHealth for lots and lots of reasons. However, we are the communication barrier, the use of sign language that you can see is a bit like the tip of an iceberg that is visible. It's easy to see the sign language and to understand how to overcome that barrier by working with interpreters. However, what you can't see kind of underneath the water in that iceberg model is the much more significant scale of deaf culture and the experience that deaf people have in every part of our lives, and that's different for different deaf people with different experiences of being deaf. That might be about going to a mainstream school and feeling very excluded. It might be about going to a deaf school but arriving as somebody who has no access to sign language. It's a bit more complicated than it might at first appear. But I would suggest that that's a bit of what I was talking about earlier. That's what's fascinating, I think, about doing work that you might feel very confident in this context. Because there's a real richness in deaf culture that you may have had no experience of so far, and I would recommend it every day. So you have something to learn, and if you are a people person, if you're an HR professional, I expect you might be quite interested in your own personal development. So I want to encourage you to think about the opportunity to bring your skills, but also to learn from us about, and I mean all of us, not me particularly, about deaf culture and the richness it brings. We're doing a leadership development, what we call our Leadership Academy at the moment. And working with an external hearing organisation who's providing some of that learning to us. But they are learning all the time about their own models of leadership development as we consider them in sign language. So yeah, there is a real richness there, but please don't be put off. Please focus instead on perhaps your own lived experience. You might have experienced marginalisation in a different way, from a different context. As a person from the global majority, as a woman, as a member of the LGBT community, I'm interested in the broadest, richest difference that we can get around the table.
Thank you very much, James. I would just say, if you are hearing, you're very welcome to talk to me afterwards directly and chat about it. We need allies, but also we can just talk about it in a relaxed way, if you'd like to. Some people have been asking what would be the priorities when starting, what would you expect to see the first 3 months, and so on.
Yeah.
So give it a figure, James.
Well, we might end up asking some of those questions in the interview, maybe. I mean, to be honest, it's a typical mix of the practical and the strategic. So, you know, we have some live issues. We have recently hired a new payroll manager who's very wonderful. And we've recently in-sourced our payroll. I think that's the right terminology. But we work with a HR system called Cascade, which some of you will be familiar with, I'm sure, which has pros and cons, shall we say. So we have some practical issues. We can manage our payroll. Don't give you too wrong an impression. But we have quite complicated payroll because we have lots of staff with variable hours and so on. So there's some practical issues, but really the gap for me is strategic. You know, we need a people strategy. We need to launch our values. We need to need this person to work in partnership with another director who will have responsibility for EDI. So EDI doesn't sit with the people director; it sits with a different director. So there's quite a lot to do. And the people team, have not had a director before who's solely responsible for people. They've been under a people and finance director who is staying, I'm very glad to say, but we'll focus purely on finance and our new transformation program. So there's a lot of change for the team, and I think they'll need some love and support. And they're a really fantastic group who deserve lots of love and support.
Thank you. Mia's asked if she could ask her question directly, so please go for it, Mia.
Hi, James and Joanna. I'm interested, given the 5 strands of activity and of your quite differing income streams, you know, your contracts and various council funding as well. How have you managed the reward approach? Do you have an established reward structure in order to have equity across the organisation?
Great question. Thank you. Yeah, so we have about 95% of our income is contract income. So we have a really strong kind of financial base for the organisation. Very diversified income. It is majority local authorities and NHS, but they're individual authorities. We don't have block contracts with authorities for residential care homes, for example. They're all spot contracts. So we've thought very hard with fees. We increased our fees by 38% last year in social care. We have a base hourly rate for our lowest paid roles in social care of £13.50 an hour. So we're ahead of the real living wage, which we're a member of. We try to pay in the kind of upper quartile because we are rewarding staff who are working in 2 languages and 2 cultures, who have very specialist skills, and it's very hard to get people. And we have quite a particular position in the marketplace. We're offering very specialised services that are quite expensive for public sector commissioners to purchase, and so we need to provide real quality back in the delivery of our contracts. And we employ some really fantastically skilled people. I'm very, very proud to work here and work with the people that I work with. So I think we need to pay them properly. There's some more work to do on reward. I think we've done quite well on pay, but of course, we're not a particularly wealthy organisation. We have not very high reserves because we spent a lot of it on our kind of growth and transition journey. So we are returning the organisation to an operational surplus. We've got a budget for the new financial year just begun, which includes a small investment in growth of fundraising and our new transformation programme. But other than that, we would be at break even. That pushes us into deficit slightly, but other than that, we'd be at break even. But we come from a position of more than £1 million deficit, investing in the growth of salaries often, particularly to battle the cost of living. So we're quite a good employer, I think, from a raw perspective, purely salary, but we've got more work to do. We've got a pension review looming. I think our benefits could improve. I think there's always a challenge for us to partner with external providers like EAPs, for example, who are truly accessible. We do have an EAP, but maybe not as accessible as we'd like them to be. So yeah, there are some challenges there, but they're kind of exciting, interesting challenges and things that you, again, perhaps wrestled with before, but not in this way and for this group of people. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. Can I quickly add in one more? Just, you mentioned EDI sits outside of the people team. What about safeguarding? How is that structured across the organisation?
Sure. So our Director of Operations leads safeguarding. She's the designated safeguarding lead. She leads the safeguarding reference group, which pulls together colleagues from across the organisation. And we have an interim Director of Ops at the moment. We're just about to go out for permanent recruitment for a Director of Ops, but our interim Director of Ops is doing a fantastic job. Yeah, I think we've got more work to do on safeguarding kind of outside of ops, if you know what I mean. So really strengthening colleagues who work in finance and people and other fundraising, strengthening their confidence around safeguarding. But yeah, safeguarding is led through operations.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to Bernadette and then I'll come back to the chat, okay?
Yeah, okay. I guess just a quick question. So your residential accommodation, is that subject to CQC right requirements, right? Okay. So you've gone through all the inspections, you regularly do the inspections, and yeah, okay, fine. All right, that was just a James, this is going to be a really direct question to you. I guess you said you did like a challenge. So if I was to ask a member of the exec team to describe your leadership style, what do you think that they would say?
I think they'd probably, I mentioned insights earlier. This is my insights colours, by the way, if that means anything to any of you. They talk about my red energy. So I can be a bit too fast and a bit too blunt sometimes, but I try quite hard to manage that. I think I'm, like a lot of chief execs, very ambitious for the organisation, and some of what my colleagues in ELT do is try and like gently pull me back a little bit. But I hope they would say I'm, fair and good to work with. I mean, I do think it's about working as a team. You know, we're this team is an additional role into our ELT, so we'll grow the team to 6 people, and the cross the table relationships are more important than I'd say, the relationship with the director with me, the relationship with the director of ops and so on. The director of finance, really critical to this role. So we're a team of people. The organisation is not about me. The organisation is about the purpose and the deaf community.
Okay, fine, thank you. Can I just ask another quick question? And that's about the people team. How would you describe their levels of experience in the people team, James?
I guess Well, we have an interim head who is an interim, so perhaps not fair to talk about her, although she's amazing. I think really strong, I would say, but a team that needs some love and support. We don't have anybody in that team with 20 and 30 years of experience. It's a relatively young team. I hope they would like me saying that. But very passionate, very skilled. I think, like a lot of people who work at SignHealth, perhaps people haven't been exposed to lots of other ways of doing things. So one of the things I'm looking for in this role is for someone to come in and look at how we do things and say, oh, that's great. There are 10 other ways to do that. Which is the best way for SignHealth? So sometimes it's about breadth of experience, I think, perhaps.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just check if anybody else wants to turn on their camera and ask a question? Please feel free to turn it on, okay? Otherwise, I will look at the chat. I think there were some people asking, do you have to work for a charity before?
Do you have to work for a charity? No, I don't think you do. I mean, there's a big advantage because there's particular rules and regulations about how we work. There are some cultural elements about the way that we work, I think, that are really important and that would accelerate your progress. But I don't think we want to cut off opportunities to meet great people. A lot of this role is about your openness to learning, whether that's a new language or a new culture or just being a bit more open to difference. And so I think we need to be able to do that too. But yes, if you've worked in a charity sector organisation before, in a service provider organisation before, I think you're going to be at an advantage. That doesn't mean you shouldn't apply.
Thank you. And am I right in thinking you're looking for a person with lots of experience at working in people areas?
Yes, you will be the most senior. I would say, I was tempted to say the most senior qualified HR person, but I don't want to create too many barriers around qualifications because we know that that's not great for access. But you will be the senior HR lead in the organisation. And so it is important that you are confident in your HR knowledge and that we are too. I've been working in the charity sector myself since 2001, and I've been working in ops for a long time, and I have really strong opinions about how we do consultations, terms and conditions, reward, and I'm expecting to work alongside somebody who also has very strong opinions and who is in the lead. So I will challenge you if I think, well, hang on a minute, that's not what I expected you to say. Why are you saying something different? Maybe I'm learning something, or like, so I'm expecting somebody who's really ready to bring a strong view on what that should look like.
Thank you. And can I just check, how does it work with some people working remotely and others being residential? Is there any sort of, not conflict, but any sort of strains in relation to that?
I mean, easy for me to say. I don't think so. We all accept that the work that's done in our residential care services is just very different to our other work, and of course has to happen in person. It was challenging during COVID. Our colleagues continue to deliver our services to a very high standard. We've maintained our CQC ratings throughout, and all of our services are rated good. I think it is tough. I think the bigger strain is that we struggle to have the same. We don't pay people as much in social care because the way that the contracts are structured, and the way that the kind of bigger picture external perspective that the state, the country doesn't value social care, sadly, as much as it should. But I don't think there's a particular tension from them being face to face and us not being.
Thank you. I'm just checking with somebody called, I apologise if I say your name incorrectly, Farial. Do you want to sort of speak your question, or because you're asking if we can hear you, so I'm just not clear if you want to ask the question now?
Yes, well, can you hear me? Yeah, do you want me to ask questions at the end or can
Go
go?
for it now.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for this session. It was very informative and I'm very intrigued. I would like to know what specific qualities and experiences are you seeking in the ideal candidate for this position, considering the organization's new 3-year strategy?
Sure. I mean, some of this is covered in the pack that is on the Diversifying Group website, so I don't want to repeat too much of what's in there. But we are looking for somebody who has quite a lot of experience to bring, but to deliver that as I've been talking about in our kind of slightly different kind of context. So I think you probably need a certain amount of confidence. This is an unusual setting. You might be somebody coming from another deaf organisation, so I don't want to oversell our unusualness too much. But equally, you might be from another charity that's delivering services perhaps at a much bigger scale. You might be delivering lots and lots of social care services and be familiar with all kinds of issues. We want that kind of experience, but we'll be doing it slightly differently at SignHealth. You might be leading a smaller HR team, but in a similarly sized organisation. We might have a bit more resource here than you're familiar with in other organisations. But this is a director role. We are looking for someone to operate at director level. I'm not a micromanager. I expect us to work as a team and for you to be fairly self-starting and self-serving. And for us to be able to hold each other accountable for what we're responsible for. So this is by no means a kind of entry-level role. You know, we're looking for somebody with significant experience.
Thank you very much. Somebody just asked, what is the HR budget of 750,000 encompass?
I mean, broadly, it encompasses, from memory, the budget for the staff team. All of the training is centralised into that budget for the organisation, and then it'll be a kind of ragtag of stuff. I mean, our budgets are structured in a particular way, as they always are in different organisations. We have, I think, a healthy budget for HR, but we're looking for someone to develop a people strategy that might identify future requirements in future years, which we would then budget for. The big priority is to get the people strategy nailed with all of the stakeholder groups, you know, not just with me in a darkened room, and then for us to start to make decisions off the back of that strategy. So, for example, when we're looking at our approach to flexible working, which of course is changing, how far out ahead of legal minimum requirement should SignHealth be? How aspirational are we for a fantastic employment experience? I would expect our people strategy to kind of help us see that. I want that to help us kind of divine, you know, where our aspirations are in lots of different ways. So I think we want to start with strategy and then look at resourcing.
Thank you. You know, you've obviously grown the organisation already to 10 million, and now you're hoping to grow it again to 15 million. We've got a question to say, is the strategy to grow both residential and community services or other services, or the, I don't know, domestic abuse service, or are you planning any new services?
Sure, great question. And the straightforward answer is we're looking for 3 new residential services. I think other services will probably grow too, slightly, but we opened a new supported living service in Leeds last year. We're looking to replicate that model across 3 other locations, and each of those locations has a staff team of between 30 and 40 staff. Quite intensive work, yeah, so most of our growth, both financially and in terms of headcount, would come from 3 new residential services.
So am I right in thinking the money will mostly come from local authorities for those services?
Yeah.
So essentially, we can expect, as well as sorting out the culture and so on, some of it can be quite practical in recruiting staff to learn about the values, the culture of SignHealth, as well as the usual sort of safeguarding and so on.
Yeah, and there's some, I think there's some really interesting stuff to do in those practical areas. So we're reviewing a lot of our policy at the moment, our internal staff policy at the moment, and trying to make it much more accessible. We're using new software called Page Tiger to make that more accessible for staff, a mixture of text and video content. So I'm looking for us to, again, use the people strategy to review our policy. But I'm also really interested in how we push the envelope. So, for example, we don't currently have any formal policy position on the menopause, on supporting managers to understand menopause, or supporting staff who are experiencing menopause. I want us to be a fantastic employer who's ahead of that curve, not behind it. I want our HR policy to recognise the transition that some of our trans staff might go through, and for us to be at the front edge of that, not the back edge. So there's some practical stuff, but there's also some hopefully kind of more interesting stuff too. I often say that I want people's experience of working at SignHealth to be the best job they ever have. That doesn't mean they're going to stay forever. It might be that it's the third of 6 jobs they have in their career, but at the end of the career, I want them to look back and go, do you know what? The best job I had was at SignHealth. And I think that's the sort of mercurial, hard to catch nature of that is hidden within the culture that we develop as an exec team. It's about the policy decisions we make. It's about the flexibility we show. It's about the decisions we can make because we're 200 or 300 people. We're not 2,000 people. So we do know people enough to trust people, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to be generous. That's really important to me, that we look after people and we recognise the significant effort that people are making on behalf of the purpose of the organisation and part of the community that many of us are a member of. I want us to love people. That might include tough love, but it's meant to be a relationship of deep love and respect. It's not a transactional, come and join us for 6 months and then you'll kind of fall off. That's not who we are. It's not what I want us to be.
Thanks very much, James. I think it's about all of us working together, isn't it? For a better world. I'm so conscious we've got 2 minutes left and I would like to wrap up on time. I want to thank James for answering the questions, but really the important people to thank you for asking fantastic questions and making the time to come. I would like to ask Emmanuel to turn on his camera as well. And just to remind you that you're very welcome to ask questions after tonight. So if you suddenly think, oh, I want to know this, please contact Emmanuel or me, email us. Remember, no question is a stupid question. So feel free to contact us. Thank you. I just got 3 new messages. Let me just check they're not really important. But they're just saying thank you, which is good.
Perfect.
And Emmanuel, is there anything you want to say?
Yes, so I've made sure I've shared both of our email addresses there. Joanna and I will be free to answer any emails or jump on any calls. As Joanna mentioned, we would be happy to pick up any questions around the process or around the role after this. So please don't hesitate to get in contact with us.
Okay, we've got 1 minute left. So I'm here. If you're happy to turn on your camera, let's all wave at each other and feel nice when we finish. If you don't want to, put a heart in your box and so on, but let's all feel
Thank you,
good
everyone.
together before we go off and watch TV, have tea or whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.